Atlanta heat in July was unforgiving, especially on Cascade Road Southwest. I stood at the kitchen island, staring at the condensation dripping down the glass pitcher of sweet tea. I was 40 years old. I was an African-American woman who had built a life, a beautiful home in one of Atlanta's most historic neighborhoods, and yet, I felt entirely invisible inside it. "This chicken is completely dry, Maya." Evelyn's voice cut through the steady hum of the central air conditioner. I closed my eyes, taking a slow, grounding breath before turning around. My mother-in-law sat at the head of my dining table, a seat that rightfully belonged to me, prodding the roasted chicken with her silver fork, as if it were roadkill. "I cooked it exactly the way Marcus likes it, Evelyn," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even. "Marcus likes it when a woman actually knows her way around a kitchen," she snapped back, adjusting the pearl necklace resting against her collarbone. "He just settles for this, because you refuse to learn." I looked at my husband. Marcus sat beside her, silently chewing his food, his dark eyes fixed firmly on his plate. "Marcus," I said, hoping for a single sliver of defense. "Just let it go, Maya," he mumbled, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Mama is just giving you constructive criticism." Constructive criticism. That was the cowardly phrase he used now to mask her relentless cruelty. When we first got married 5 years ago at the Cascade United Methodist Church, Marcus had promised to protect me. He promised we were an unbreakable team. But month by month, year by year, Evelyn had chipped away at his loyalty. She whispered lies, twisted my words, and humiliated me at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, and every Sunday dinner. She was systematically turning my own home into a psychological battlefield. "A real wife would make sure her husband comes home to a peaceful, nurturing environment," Evelyn continued, sipping her tea with exaggerated elegance. "But all you do is stress him out with your little downtown admin job. What exactly do you even do all day, Maya? Filing papers for the county?" "I manage logistics," I said quietly, staring at the hardwood floor. It was the cover story I had maintained for years. They thought I was a low-level administrative assistant for the state government. They had no idea I was a commissioned officer in the United States Army, Major Maya Jenkins, stationed just a short drive away at Fort Gillem. My uniform, my rank, my top-secret clearance. It was a life I kept entirely separate. Originally, I kept it quiet for security protocols, but eventually it became my only sanctuary, away from their suffocating judgment. The dinner dragged on, a familiar, agonizing ritual. I knew the truth that hovered in the toxic, unspoken spaces between us. Marcus was cheating. I had smelled the cheap foreign perfume on his suit jackets. I had seen the late-night text messages illuminating his phone screen in the dark. I bore the pain in silence, hoping it was a midlife phase, hoping my unwavering love would somehow bring him back to the man I married. Dear viewers, please let us know where you are watching from and which region or country you are in. Please like this video, watch it until the end, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is very important to us. Thank you so much. Later that evening, after Evelyn finally drove back to her expensive townhouse in Buckhead, I stood in the laundry room, sorting Marcus's clothes. A small black burner phone tumbled out of his jacket pocket and clattered onto the tile floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked it up. It was unlocked. The screen displayed a thread of messages with a woman named Jasmine. The texts were explicit, graphic, and utterly devastating. "I cannot wait to see you, baby. Tomorrow, I am bringing you home. She will not do anything. Mama is helping me pack her up." My breath hitched in my throat. But it was the next message that froze the blood in my veins. It was a picture of a legal document from the Fulton County Probate Court. I zoomed in on the glowing screen. It was a life insurance policy in my name, signed and notarized, for $3 million, and listed as the primary beneficiary was not Marcus, but Evelyn. The Georgia sun beat down on the pavement the next morning as I sat in my car in the driveway of my own home. I touched my stomach, a subconscious, protective gesture I had been making for 3 days. I was pregnant, 8 weeks. I had not told Marcus yet, waiting for the right moment, desperately hoping a child would bridge the terrifying chasm between us. Now, the child inside me felt like a hostage in a war zone. A silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Marcus stepped out, followed by a young, light-skinned woman with long extensions and a designer bag. Jasmine. I stepped out of my car, my legs trembling but my spine straight. Marcus, I said, my voice cutting through the humid summer air. Who is this? This is Jasmine, Maya, Marcus said smoothly, not even looking me in the eye. She is a new consultant at my logistics firm. She needs a place to stay for a few weeks while her apartment in Midtown is being renovated. She is not staying in my house, I said, stepping forward to block the pathway to the front porch. Before Marcus could speak, Evelyn's black Lexus SUV tore into the driveway, parking haphazardly on the front lawn. She marched out, her eyes blazing with absolute disdain. She is staying wherever my son tells her to stay, Evelyn shouted, storming up the concrete walkway. You do not own him, Maya. You do not even own this house. My name is on the deed, Evelyn, I fired back, the tears I had promised myself I would not shed beginning to blur my vision. Not anymore, Evelyn sneered with a vicious, triumphant smile. Marcus reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. He shoved it toward my chest. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a quit-claim deed, filed perfectly with Fulton County, transferring my ownership of the Cascade Road property entirely to Marcus. The signature at the bottom was my perfect forgery. You forged my signature, I whispered, looking from the heavy paper to my husband's cold, indifferent face. You signed it last month when you were drunk, Maya, Marcus lied without blinking. Jasmine is moving into the guest room. If you do not like it, you can pack your bags. Actually, Evelyn interrupted, crossing her arms over her chest. She is moving into the master bedroom. You can take the guest room, Maya. Or better yet, the streets. The sheer audacity, the coordinated ambush, left me paralyzed. My husband, the man I swore my life to before God, stood beside his mistress and his mother, actively destroying my life. Get out of my son's house, Evelyn screamed, clapping her hands aggressively in my face. You are nothing. You are a broke, barren, useless woman. Barren. The cruel word echoed in my mind as my hand grazed my stomach. I am packing my things, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly, icy whisper. I walked past them, ascending the stairs to the master suite. I packed 2 suitcases with my essentials. I did not cry. The sorrow had instantly crystallized into pure, unadulterated rage. As I walked out the front door, dragging my luggage behind me, Jasmine was already sitting on my expensive Italian leather sofa, laughing loudly as Marcus poured her a drink. I drove straight to Piedmont Hospital, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I had a scheduled blood test for my prenatal care. Dr. Aris, a kind older woman, called me into her private office. Maya, the baby is healthy, Dr. Aris said, her brow furrowed in deep, unsettling concern. But I rushed these tox screens because of the symptoms you described last week. Your extreme fatigue, your hair thinning, the constant nausea. Is it just the pregnancy? I asked, gripping the edge of the medical examination table. No, Dr. Aris said grimly, sliding a laboratory report across the desk. Maya, you have lethal levels of thallium in your bloodstream. It is an odorless, tasteless heavy metal. Someone is slowly poisoning you to death. I did not go to a friend's house. I did not go to a cheap motel. I drove straight through the heavily guarded gates of Dobbins Air Reserve Base. The military police at the security checkpoint snapped a sharp salute as they saw my ID badge. "Good afternoon, Major," the young guard said. "Good afternoon, Corporal," I replied, my voice steady despite the hurricane of betrayal raging in my chest. I parked in my designated spot and walked into the commanding officer's building. I changed into my operational camouflage pattern uniform. I pinned the gold oak leaves to my chest. I looked at myself in the mirror of my private office. I was no longer the weak, weeping wife on Cascade Road. I was a senior intelligence and logistics officer for the Department of Defense. I picked up my encrypted secure phone and dialed Captain Miller, my lead cybersecurity analyst. "Miller, I need a complete digital forensic workup on 2 civilian targets," I commanded, Marcus Vance and Evelyn Vance. "Pull financial records, tax returns, encrypted communications, offshore accounts, and property deeds in Fulton County." "Yes, ma'am," Miller replied instantly. "Is this an official military inquiry?" "Let us call it a joint federal investigation," I said coldly. I spent the next 3 days living in the officers' quarters, on base. I drank gallons of purified water, taking the heavy chelating medication Dr. Aris prescribed to strip the rat poison from my system, desperately protecting my unborn child. Every cramp in my stomach fueled my absolute resolve to destroy the monsters who tried to murder me and my baby. On the 3rd night, Miller walked into my office and placed a thick, classified binder on my metal desk. "Major, what we found is deeply disturbing," Miller said, standing at rigid attention. I flipped through the glowing pages. Marcus's logistics consulting firm was a complete shell company. But he was not just hiding a mistress. The bank accounts linked Marcus to a sophisticated embezzlement ring, stealing millions from a defense contractor based right here in Atlanta. But that was not the terrible secret. I turned to the final page, a birth certificate, and a sealed court record from Louisiana. "Explain this," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I traced the faded ink on the document. "Evelyn Vance is not Marcus's mother," Miller said quietly. "She is his senior business partner. They use the mother-son dynamic to infiltrate wealthy social circles, gain trust, and run long-term financial scams. Jasmine is not a mistress, Major. She is an expert document forger. They targeted you because of your high-level military clearance and your pristine credit score. They have been draining your identity to fund illegal arms shipments out of the port of Savannah. My entire reality shattered into a million pieces. My 5-year marriage was a premeditated, highly organized criminal operation, and the poison was their exit strategy." I closed the heavy binder. "Contact the FBI field office in Atlanta," I ordered, my eyes burning with a terrifying clarity. "Get me Special Agent Harrison. We are taking them down." It was Sunday afternoon. I knew their routine perfectly. They would be sitting at my dining table, eating a lavish meal cooked in my kitchen, celebrating my disappearance, and counting down the days until my impending death. I parked 2 blocks away from my house on Cascade Road. I was not in civilian clothes. I wore my Army service uniform, the crisp blue fabric immaculate, the ribbons gleaming on my chest, my rank unmistakable. I was not alone. 2 black armored SUVs from the FBI and 3 cruisers from the Atlanta Police Department idled silently on the tree-lined street. Special Agent Harrison walked up to me, adjusting the straps on his Kevlar vest. "We have the perimeter secured, Major Jenkins," Harrison said respectfully. "Warrants for wire fraud, identity theft, federal embezzlement, and attempted murder are signed by the federal judge." "I want to go in first," I said, checking the safety on my sidearm. "It is your house, Major," Harrison nodded. I walked up the manicured lawn. The heavy summer air was thick with the sweet scent of magnolias. I did not knock. I used my heavy brass key to unlock the front door. The sound of laughter echoed from the dining room. I stepped into the archway, letting the shadows conceal me for just a second. Marcus, Evelyn, and Jasmine were sitting at the table, drinking expensive mimosas. "What the hell are you doing here?" Evelyn shrieked, dropping her crystal glass. It shattered against the hardwood floor. "And why are you wearing a Halloween costume?" Marcus stood up rapidly, his face flushed with sudden anger. "I told you to never come back here, Maya," he growled, marching toward me with his fists clenched. "You are trespassing. I will call the cops." "Call them," I said, my voice echoing like thunder in the silent house. I stepped aside as the front door burst open behind me. Dozens of heavily armed federal agents and APD officers flooded into the living room, their tactical rifles raised and trained on the dining table. "FBI, nobody move. Show me your hands right now," Agent Harrison roared. The color completely drained from Marcus's face. He stumbled backward, his hands shooting up in the air as he hit the wall. Jasmine screamed, diving under the mahogany table. Evelyn sat frozen, her mouth open in absolute shock as red laser sights danced across her expensive silk blouse. "Marcus Vance, you are under arrest for federal embezzlement, identity theft, and attempted murder," Harrison announced, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto Marcus's wrists and forcing him to his knees. "Attempted murder," Marcus stammered, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Maya, what is going on? Tell them to stop. I am your husband." "You are not my husband," I said, walking slowly toward him, my polished boots clicking sharply against the floor. "You are a con artist, and this woman is not your mother." Evelyn glared at me, her true venom finally unmasked. "You stupid bitch," Evelyn spat as an officer yanked her roughie out of her chair. "You have no idea who you are messing with. We will destroy you in court." "You will not make it to a civilian court, Evelyn," I replied coldly, staring down at her. "The contractor you embezzled from is a Department of Defense asset. You committed treason." I watched as they dragged the three of them out of my house in heavy chains. The flashing blue and red police lights painted the walls of my home, finally cleansing it of their darkness. Agent Harrison walked up to me, holding a small, clear glass vial he had pulled from Evelyn's designer purse. "We found the thallium, Major. You were right about everything." "Thank you, Agent Harrison," I said, looking around my strangely empty house. Suddenly, a sharp, agonizing pain ripped through my lower abdomen. I gasped, dropping to my knees as the room spun violently. Blood began to pool on the floor beneath me. The intense stress, the lingering poison, the adrenaline, it was all catching up to my battered body. "Officer down! We need an ambulance now!" Harrison screamed frantically into his shoulder radio. The edges of my vision turned black as I collapsed onto the cold hardwood, praying to God to save my baby. The steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor pulled me from the darkness. The sterile smell of antiseptic stung my nose. I forced my heavy eyelids open, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit at Piedmont Hospital. "Welcome back, Major." I turned my head slowly. Dr. Aris was standing beside my bed, reviewing a medical chart. Next to her stood my commanding officer, General Thomas, looking exceptionally grim. "My baby," I choked out, my hands flying immediately to my stomach in a blind panic. "Your baby is a fighter, just like you," Dr. Aris said, offering a warm, deeply reassuring smile. "We managed to stabilize your vitals. The thallium levels are dropping significantly. You experienced a severe placental abruption due to the physical trauma and stress, but the fetal heartbeat is strong. You will need strict bed rest, but you are both going to survive." Tears of pure, overwhelming relief slipped down my cheeks, soaking into the hospital pillow. "Thank God," I whispered. General Thomas stepped forward, placing a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did excellent work, Maya," he said softly. "The FBI raided the warehouse at the port an hour ago. They recovered $30 million in stolen military technology. Vance and his entire syndicate are looking at federal life sentences at ADX Florence." "Did they confess?" I asked, my throat dry and hoarse. Evelyn tried to pin it all on Marcus. The general chuckled darkly. She claimed he was a rogue agent, and she was just a helpless old woman caught in his web. But Marcus cracked during the interrogation. He gave up the entire network to avoid the death penalty for the treason charges. "He traded his fake mother for a plea deal," I said, feeling a strange, hollow sense of poetic justice. "Exactly," Thomas nodded. "The military tribunal wants your official testimony next month, provided you are medically cleared." "I will be there, sir," I promised. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. I did not go back to the house on Cascade Road. I hired a crew of movers to pack all my belongings and put the property on the market immediately. That house was a tomb of lies, a grand monument to a life that never actually existed. I rented a beautiful, light-filled penthouse in Buckhead, overlooking the entire glittering skyline of Atlanta. I decorated the nursery in soft greens and yellows. I focused entirely on my health, my demanding career, and the new life growing inside me. The trial at the Richard B. Russell Federal Building downtown was a massive media spectacle. When I took the witness stand in my full military dress uniform, the packed courtroom fell dead silent. Marcus looked like a hollow, pathetic shell of the arrogant man I once knew. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his shoulders slumped, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Evelyn glared at me from the defense table, her face twisted with a hideous hatred she could no longer hide behind a fake mask of maternal concern. I answered the federal prosecutor's questions clearly, methodically breaking down their complex financial crimes, the forged deed, and the poisoning. I presented the security footage from the hidden camera I had secretly installed in the kitchen months ago to catch Marcus cheating, which instead caught Evelyn mixing the thallium into my sweet tea. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. As the armed bailiffs led them away in shackles, Marcus finally looked at me. "Maya, please," he mouthed silently across the room, tears streaming down his face. I did not blink. I did not smile. I just turned my back and walked out of the courtroom, my combat boots echoing loudly on the cold marble floor. That night, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, feeling the warm Atlanta breeze against my skin. I rested my hand gently on my very pregnant belly, feeling a strong, rhythmic kick from within. "It is just you and me now, little one," I whispered to the infinite night sky. The city lights sparkled below, a vast sea of endless possibilities. I had walked through the brutal fire of ultimate betrayal, manipulated and broken by the people I trusted most in the world. But they forgot one crucial detail when they chose me as their perfect victim. I am a soldier, and soldiers do not break, they reload. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We would love to know what you think.